VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker. We got the August 9th edition, which means if you look at the calendar, we are one day away from Vikings football. And by the time folks are watching this, probably about 28 hours or so. And like I tweeted a few minutes ago, for the next 22 weeks, minus Labor Day, minus a bye week, you have Vikings football every single week or weekday. How does that make you feel, Josh Frey?
It's like waking up on Christmas morning, man. I used that illusion before training camp started, but now I really feel like we're on the verge here of just 4 months of nonstop football, and I can't wait for it. It's gonna be a great time.
I'm pretty sure you use that on draft day as well.
Did I? Okay. Well, every day is Christmas morning on the football schedule.
Yep. All right. So what we're doing, I yesterday on the show, I teased perhaps us talking about the depth chart, but I think that with the preseason this close, what I want from you is storylines that you're watching, because we think starters will rest. They rested every, how can I say this politely, meaningful starter last year. They went 0-3, and then they won 13 games. So I don't think they're going to start starting starters right now. So it's going to be a bunch of backup things, which there's no problem with that. I like it this way. If anybody cares, like I'd rather not even bother risking Jefferson, Cousins, or Danielle Hunter. Let's just do it this way. So with no further ado, why don't you start? I don't care which order you rank them. Give me one of 5 storylines that the editor of Purple PTSD is monitoring.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, the depth chart that came out this week, I know it threw us for a loop. Me and you, we were talking about it in our Slack channel. But Blake Brandel being listed as the right guard, back up behind Ed Ingram, that was interesting to me considering what he did at left tackle last year. He stepped in and did pretty well at that position when Darisaw went down, especially in that Buffalo game, and then he had another really great game against the New York Jets. But with him at guard, I'm watching to see, do they actually play him at guard tomorrow night? What does the offensive line sort of makeup look like throughout the night? And if he is truly going to be switching over to this right guard spot, that opens up a big opportunity for Vidarian Lowe in his second NFL season, who was basically the third or fourth string tackle last year, didn't really get a ton of chances out on the field. But if he's the true backup now, they must have some sort of faith in him that he is ready to go and ready to play at an NFL level. And we've seen Darisaw, he goes down. He's a great talent when he's on the field, but he has gone down with injuries a couple times throughout his career. So if he gets banged up again, is Lowe going to be able to step up and fill in that tackle spot? Brian O'Neill as well. He's still coming back from that Achilles injury. So he's projected to be ready for week 1. But if that doesn't really work out, he has a hiccup along the way, is Lowe going to step up and be that right tackle? That's really who I'm looking forward to seeing tomorrow night against the Seahawks is Vidarian Lowe. Is he going to be basically the next sort of tackle star in Minnesota, I guess?
So for context for the guys and gals watching, Josh and I honestly discussed whether or not Blake Brandel at guard was a typo. Because we started to think like, so here's our thinking. Blake Brandel's 6'7", and usually that height suggests you're on the outside of the offensive line. One time on my other show with Brian McKinney, when we were going through guard hell in like the 2020 season, I asked him offhandedly, could you play guard in a pinch? And he's like, me? He's like, I'm 6'8". And so that like disqualified the guard conversation. Now I know like is it Andrus Peat from your old team, the Saints? He's 6'7". Mm-hmm. So I know that guards can get that big, but it is actually pretty rare. And for Brandel, the only thing I can speculate is we have skinny guard depth with Chris Reed on the NFI. They haven't signed Dalton Reisner. So maybe it's just we're going to pencil him in here for vibes. Or because we already know Brando can play tackle, maybe he's going to be a hybrid so that they save a roster spot. And in reality, if something happens to O'Neill or Darisaw, boom, there's Brandel at tackle. Or if something happens to Cleveland, boom, there's Brandel at guard. Because it didn't really make sense to unceremoniously just switch Brandel, who, in my estimation, whether it was leading into the draft or if with the Vikings now for 3 seasons, he's always been a tackle. And I mean, I don't have any qualms if he's actually a good guard, and we'll take it. But I'm right there with you trying to figure out how the offensive line work. And I actually asked a bunch of our Vikings territory and Purple PTSD writers about some of the things they're watching, and two of them mentioned the offensive line play and guard in particular. So, for you men and women watching, circle, what the hell are we doing with Blake Brandel? Is Vidarian Lowe going to be the, LT2 or RT2 when it's September arrives? What do you got for number 2, my man?
Number 2, I'm just watching Jaren Hall. When he gets on the field tomorrow night, is he going to look like an NFL quarterback? Because, I mean, I wouldn't say the Vikings necessarily need him to look great right away, but it'd be nice if he was a guy that was able to come in after the Kellen Mond experience that we went through in 2021 and 2022. If he could be a guy that just comes in and sort of just looks the part of an NFL QB. Obviously, we still got Cousins, still got Nick Mullins, so it's not the most dire situation in the world. But I truly think that the performance of Hall over the next few weeks and throughout practice this fall, I think that's going to determine if the Vikings seriously target a quarterback in the draft. He's not necessarily playing for his job right now, but he also kind of is, because he has a chance to be the quintessential QB of the future in Minnesota if he can come in and just look the part of a QB, come in and go through his reads, not really put a ton of pressure on himself, I guess. It looked like he's scrambling a lot, kind of exactly what happened with Mon while he was in Minnesota. So I'm just paying attention to him, see what he can do out on the field tomorrow night.
So I will say foremost, I agree with you 100 percentile about everything you just said about Hall. I think we're due because the Kellen Mond experiment struck out. Both coaches, Mike Zimmer and Kevin O'Connell, determined this guy ain't it. And then you saw him, the Hall of Fame guy, Hall of Fame game.
Didn't look great.
Yeah, didn't look like they're probably going to figure out he ain't it and go with Dorian Thompson-Robinson as QB2. But this, to reiterate, is so damn vital in a vacuum. It really doesn't matter if a 5th round quarterback is playing in the preseason. However, for the first time in Vikings history, Kirk Cousins does not guaranteed to play the next year. And there is no other time on the calendar to learn whether or not Jaren Hall has the beginnings of a QB1. And that officially starts tomorrow night in quasi-real action. Now, there's a chance that we're laughing Friday morning thinking, God, we really thought that guy could be the QB1. He looked like a total turd. That could happen. That's usually what happens with 5th rounders when you try to stuff them into a QB1 basket. But the other thing about Hall is that he's 25 years old. So if he's going to be somebody's QB1 in the vein of Dak Prescott from round, what was he, 4? Cousins rounds 4 in 2012. Russell Wilson, not a first rounder in 2012. If he's going to be one of those types of guys, he better get going. That was the risk we took, whether it was going to be Hendon Hooker or Jaren Hall or a lot of these quarterbacks now because of the COVID year, is he's old. So he should be more mature and poised, and that should, in theory, translate to the field. And that's what Mond was the opposite. Mond was young, very raw, and we held out high hopes because Cousins was kind of in flux. We weren't sure if Spielman and the gang were going to move on from him. Now we know that Cousins has indeed played 2 more years since then, but he's only scheduled to play 1 more. So we should say that if Hall does look like an imbecile, that doesn't mean his career is over, but you're going to know right away, like, just the eye test that people like to reference. All right, is this guy a viable option? Because unless the Vikings, I think, win 1, probably 2 playoff games, they're going to be staring a depth chart in the face on January, blah, 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 thinking, now what do we do at quarterback? And it's real dicey because you either have to trade for Kyler Murray, you have to somehow get into the Caleb Williams and Drake May sweepstakes, then that won't be easy. We say that, well, yeah, they might be able to do that. Well, you're gonna have to trade everything, and that's assuming that that will even be an option. You might have quarterback hungry teams like Washington or Atlanta or Tampa already just locked in, saying we ain't trading this shit. And then you're looking at your guy, is it Jaden McDaniels?
Jaden Daniels, LSU. Yep.
Jaden Daniels. Yep. All right. So, yeah, Jaren Hall, these next 3 games, just to see if he has the poise and maturity to be an option for QB1 of the Vikings in 2024. Hopefully, we don't need them. Hopefully, they get to the Super Bowl, do the thing, and then Cousins gets the statue, and then we don't really care who the quarterback is after that. All right, what's number 3?
Number 3, I'm going Jordan Addison. He was listed as WR3 on the depth chart. Obviously, it's way too early to determine whether him or KJ Osborne is going to be the starter week 1 against Tampa Bay. But tomorrow night is a really big stepping stone for Addison and his growth as an NFL player. If he can go out there, make a few nice catches, run a few good routes, I think he's just as much in the mix right now as Osborne for that WR2 spot. I think they're neck and neck. But if Addison goes out there and plays well tomorrow night, I think that he has a chance to usurp Osborne for that WR2 for week one. So just another guy that I'm looking forward to seeing out in the field. And I think Kevin O'Connell made a really interesting comment this week where Addison, when he came into the draft, it was, is he going to be able to hold up because of his size? He's only like 170 pounds, 6 feet tall. He's skinny as a rail. And O'Connell made a really interesting comment about his impact in the running game as well. And he's really stepping up and being a willing blocker in that department. And with the Vikings, supposedly at least being more focused on implementing the run this year, I think that his impact in that area is going to be necessary for him to get on the field a lot, because Osborne's a really good blocker. Jefferson's willing to do it when he has to. And if they can have a third guy in there that is able to be a run blocking wide receiver and just willing to put his body on the line on a weekly basis, I mean, he's right there in the mix. So it's going to be interesting to see how they implement him tomorrow night.
I love how coaches love run blocking by wide receivers. Like, you get these guys like Jefferson or Addison as first rounders, and then coaches are touting their ability to run block. It's real coach speak, and I like it. Here's what I think's what's going to happen with Addison and Osborne. Now that we've seen the first depth chart, it vividly lists Justin Jefferson, KJ Osborne, the starters. And in fact, it appears Addison is buried at WR4, which won't last long. I don't think it's going to matter week 1, week 2, week 3 that Osborne is slated as WR2. I think we're going to see Addison get on the field. He'll make his thumbprint on the team. And then it's almost irrelevant who's technically the WR2. I kind of feel that way about free safety as well, whether it's Cameron Bynum, Lewis Seen, or Josh Metellus. I think just in namesake, we're like, all right, Osborne won the WR2. Oh, it looks like it's Cameron Bynum again. I think based on the utility on the field and the way that Kwesi has drafted these guys with a lot of college experience and a lot of versatility in general, I don't think anybody, including yourself, should be disappointed if we get to September 9th, looking at a depth chart and you're like, Osborne's WR2. I think the target load will turn out to be equitable with Osborne. Of course, Jefferson hopefully has 2.5 times as many targets as anybody else. But I think it's kind of just like a participation trophy if somebody gets the WR2 or Lewis Seen doesn't win free safety, damn it. I think he's going to get in the mix.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too, because at the end of the day, there's going to be plenty of snaps out there where they've got at least 3 wide receivers on the field with Kevin O'Connell's offense. So there's going to be opportunities for all 3 of them, regardless on where they end up on the depth chart. So yeah, I 100% agree with you. Glad you brought that up too.
And then also remember in 2020, the Vikings depth chart was Adam Thielen, BC Johnson, Justin Jefferson. And Jefferson was also like in a miniature doghouse for screwing something up in one of his first games. Was it against the Packers?
I believe so. Yeah.
Like either ran a incorrect route or did something nefarious or accidental. And then that just goes to show if BC Johnson can beat out Justin Jefferson, then I'm here to report that Jalen Naylor could even beat out Jordan Addison on a depth chart. It's just kind of the way it goes. We shall see if O'Connell slow rolls rookies like Zimmer tended to at times. What's number 4 on your list?
Number 4, I'm just excited to see Brian Flores' defense in action, man. I think it's going to be completely different from what we saw last year with all the blitzing, the linebackers moving around, some 3 safety sets out there too. So we might even, outside of Harrison Smith, I feel like there's a chance that we see every single one of those other safeties out on the field tomorrow night. I haven't heard for sure if they're planning on playing Cam Bynum at all, so I can't say for sure that that's going to happen, but I wouldn't be shocked if we saw everybody other than Harrison Smith at that spot. So going to be interesting to see how that lineup shakes out at the safety spot. Cornerback, I feel like we're gonna be talking about that for weeks on end with everything going on. So yeah, just Brian Flores' defense, I'm excited to see it.
I'm going to unveil one of my, sometimes on the show, I think with you, I unveil my utopian best case scenarios. And I recall in January when Ed Donatel was fired, I tweeted this, that yes, it's unlikely that the Vikings defense is fixed to the tune of a top 10 unit in one offseason. But I did say, however, in that tweet that Dan Quinn was hired by the Dallas Cowboys after a terrible defensive season in 2020. And then the 2021 NFL draft, they drafted Micah Parsons. And, those two items are big things to fix a defense. And the Cowboys changed that defense in a heartbeat. When I tweeted that, we didn't know that Brian Flores would be hired, and we also didn't know that they'd find somebody like Ivan Pace. So my best case scenario is that, yes, Brian Flores may not be as good of a defensive coordinator as Dan Quinn, and I highly doubt Ivan Pace is going to be as good as Micah Parsons. But what if there's some semblance of that good? What if Flores is in Dan Quinn's league, and what if we have Diet, Parsons, and Pace? That could transform this 30th ranked defense per points allowed, I don't know, to 13th or 14th best or something like that. So that's why I am so anxious to see this. Is the Vikings are able to win 13 games with a defense that gave up the second most yards, and so you'd got to think, even if the close game luck runs out, if you have a defense per yards, points, EPA, DVOA that's just kind of in the middle, you should be able to repeat as division champions. I don't give a shit how good the Lions or Packers are. And that is why I am looking forward to the Flores regime on top of the obvious, like Jekyll and Hyde, because we got bend but don't break. That was actually, like, those words were told. That's what they're going to do.
Bend and break.
Yeah, bend and break until we get to the fourth quarter. Then we're playing a little football.
Yeah.
Never will understand that. I'll go to my grave trying to figure out why they just didn't do that philosophy all game. But I too am very interested to see the defense, even these bench players, because even then you'll get to see some of the scheme and to see how different it feels. Because remember, we got to the point, I think it was probably when the downturn started after they lost the Cowboys and we started to be called frauds and all that. You were like, can you blitz? Can you just do something?
Yep.
Like I understand the Danielle Hunter. I understand Zadarius Smith can usually get the quarterback, but it's not doing that much. Let's do something. And now it feels like they just, took this pendulum. Like, we went from Barack Obama to Donald Trump when it comes to the difference in bend but don't break versus, aggression and blitz. When I was at that night practice a week ago, that's all they did was blitz every play. Mm-hmm. Somebody was teetering in, either teasing it or somebody was coming. And I was like, God, this is going to be fun. All right, man, hit me with your final storyline that you're monitoring for Seahawks Vikings.
Number 5, I think this is something that's been on Vikings fans' mind ever since they got back to training camp. What do these 2022 draft picks look like? We've talked about this so much on this show already, so we don't have to spend a ton of time on it unless you want to bring something up. But Lewis Cine, Andrew Booth, they've already been nicked up in practice this training camp period, but seems like they're fully healthy, back in action. I'm curious to see what sort of impact they have on the field tomorrow night, because right now Caleb Evans is winning that CB2 job, or at least that's what the depth chart suggests. That's what previous starting experience suggests. So Andrew Booth needs to make some sort of impact to be able to get into the CB depth chart. I do think that ultimately Flores is going to rotate a lot of these corners in and out depending on the sort of matchup that they get on a weekly basis. So I think that even if Evans wins the starting job, or Jovan Williams, anybody else, Booth still has a chance to play a role in this Vikings defense. And then Lewis Cine, he was just one of the most athletic safeties at Georgia that I've seen in a while throughout college football in his career. So just being able to see him in a Brian Flores defense too, and just see him be able to blitz, run some people down in open field, and just have any sort of impact. Because last year we didn't get to see a ton of him. And then obviously, I don't know if they're going to play Ed Ingram at all, but is he going to have any sort of growth at that right guard spot from last year, which was pretty horrible in terms of pass protection? It's decent in run blocking, but definitely needs to work on some pass protection. Is he going to come in and show a few extra things in terms of his technique and his playability? So yeah, just this 2022 draft class as a whole, complete mystery right now, and we'll finally be able to see some of it come into the light tomorrow.
Yeah, it's really going to be downtrodden and just shitty. If we get to week 10 or so and Cine is hurt or doesn't play, Booth is like CB4, Ingram sucks, it will really, you can hedge the bet with a Caleb Evans looking good and being a starter. I guess if you're going to draft, you're always going to find at least somebody that's pretty good. But yeah, if we get through those first 3 draft picks, it might be too soon to write an obituary by the middle of the season, but I can guarantee you if we get to December and January and we haven't had much from Booth or haven't had much from Cine, we're talking about benching Ingram for Chris Reed or something like that. Yeah, it will really look nasty for Kwesi's draft acumen, at least for that first draft. So you got to think between one of them, maybe 2, hopefully all of them, that they have some sort of role and it's not just derailed by injuries. And I think Booth would be the biggest indictment because there were flashing signs that this is why this dude isn't a top 15 pick. He's got it.
Mhm.
I think even you told me that he should have been a first rounder if it wasn't for like he didn't test because of the
Yeah, he didn't test it at the combine. He had so many. He even going back to like high school, every single year this dude has gotten hurt. So that was the red flag, the flashing red lights that hey, maybe we shouldn't take a first round pick on this guy. Otherwise, if he had been healthy with his talent on the field, what he showed at Clemson when he was healthy, this guy might have been up there with like I don't even one of the top corners off of the board in the first round of that year. So
okay.
this dude's talent is off the charts. It's just, is he going to be able to stay on the field? And that's just the most frustrating part of this whole thing. Is like this entire draft class, like seen last year with his leg fracture, Caleb Evans with his concussions, like this entire draft class outside of Ed Ingram has gone through something already in terms of injuries. And besides having depth at a lot of these places already, so they were kind of buried on the depth chart, they just didn't have a chance to even show up at practice and do much stuff because of how many of them got hurt. Like Ty Chandler even had a broken thumb that landed him on IR last year. So yeah, I'm looking forward to finally getting a chance to see a lot of these guys in action. Hopefully a few of them at least stand out as impact players this year.
I really don't think we'll have to worry about Scene. I think he is tailor-made with this defensive coordinator hire. Ingram, you'd like to think, well, we'll get better because offensive linemen often take an extra year or two to get there. But Booth is the big mystery because if he tears a hamstring in week 2, blah blah blah, then the writing will have been in the wall. Like so many injuries, but like, what did you think was going to happen when you drafted this dude? This has been the knock on him. But yeah, those are all just doomsday theories. All of these guys could contribute, and we'll start to get a glimpse of it at Seattle. If for context, for folks who plan to tune into that game, in the Minneapolis market, it'll be on Fox. It's at 9 p.m. It's just like a Lakers game. It's on the West Coast, so make sure you don't sit down at 7 thinking there's going to be hurrah, and that doesn't start till 9. All right, sir. I think by the next time we talk, it'll be Wednesday, and we'll have to figure out if we want to dissect what we saw, preview what's coming up, or both. All right, man?
Sounds great to me. Yeah, we'll wait till tomorrow night, see what happens, then decide then.
All right, wonderful. You take it easy. We'll talk to you in 1 week.
You too, man. See you later.
Later.